and the behaviors of plasma are extremely mysterious. Uh, they're becoming less mysterious, but we're still in the stage of trying to understand what the transmutation is. So when we talk about the plasma electromagnetic force, the big issue for unification comes in two things. Number one, everybody's been studying various parts of the unified force for 200 plus years, and when they discover it, then they get a stamp on it. It's their portion. This is what they did. They contributed to this, and it seems completely unrelated to this thing over here. And then somebody else comes along and they study this portion over here, and they get, for example, van der Waals forces. They get that gets attached to them, or the you got Birkeland currents, for example, and you got Van Allen belts. So everybody's getting their own portion of the unified force, and the other issue is scale, because you can be talking about masses of quarks and other particles and electron volts, and all the quantum people, they can lay dominion on that. And then these guys over here, they're literally lying to our faces. And not even giving us the courtesy to tell us, because they're saying, oh, these jets are coming right out of this black hole. Well, I'm not young enough to not remember that a black hole is something where everything gets sucked in and not even light can escape. So what are you telling me now? There's the jets shooting out of this object. It's, of course, plasma electromagnetism, and it's coming out of a plasmoid. And these are different scales. I mean, the current levels are, as different as, I mean, pico amps compared to 10 to the 17 amps. And so you have different people dividing up, and based on what they see, what they study, what they're going to attach their name to. If this person over here studies crystal plasmas, it doesn't seem related to this person over here working on superconductivity. And this is the great fallacy. This is the great problem of unifying the field. And when Sapphire steps through to do their portion, they're trying to do good basic science and focus on this part. But as you're pointing out, there is it's missing clearly, maybe even more than just magnetism, but it's a huge part. And yet I don't fault them for it, on account of, they should be capable. If we were in a country, and this gets to a different discussion completely, on the topic that I'm writing about, and it's not yet out, but if we were in a country that still believed in itself and still was reaching for the stars, so to speak, they've demonstrated enough to warrant a $10 billion contract to create the next level and to build a facility the size of, the Mall of America. What they've stumbled onto, I guarantee you, China will. If they haven't discovered the videos yet, they will, and then they will take full advantage, because you're talking about in Chinese cosmology, by the way, in the Chinese sciences, transmutation is a portion, and I don't mean it in the Sorcerer's Stone kind of lead into gold alchemy kind of way. I mean that there's a character that means metal, and it also means gold at the same time. And when you study it in the mythology, in the metaphysics, they actually believed that the metal's exposure to the sun long enough would turn it into gold. And where did they get this idea? Probably thunderbolts. So it's part of the wisdom of the ancient Chinese sciences, if they haven't rediscovered that already, if that isn't the motivation behind their fusion research, I would be highly surprised, because I think that they are aware, and they will take, of course, they will take credit for the structured atomic model. They will run with it, and then they will be the standard bearers of the new cosmology. which would be an absolute tragedy considering the men who really did spend 20, 30 years, the Jurgens and the Arps and the Birkelins of the world who spent 20, 30, 40 years and never got recognition. The Byfield and Brown, still not getting recognition after all this time. And we are going to lose that edge, and the Chinese scientists are going to probably end up with a lot of the credit, or some of the standard. I saw the article come out. Scientists finally have calculated the electric field of the sun. I'm like, oh, really? 50 years after? That's amazing. It's a real tragedy because the plasma electromagnetic cosmology has come. It's three different streams. The magnetic cosmology stream. I was talking with Gareth today about this because he did his new video, Plasma and EU, and my take on it was that he is saying what plasma universe and what electric universe are up to now, what they have been by the men, the Donald Scotts and the Walthorn Hills, as we've inherited it, and now, well, let's say it's since 2015. Where things have gone since then, this is the new world order that we're working on. But up till then, there were these different streams, and that's only natural because you had different people. It's an interesting. I would like to know if anybody's a researcher out there if Isaac Newton read Gilbert's De Magnete, because De Magnete preceded him by about 70 years. And so I would be surprised, because of course Newton could read Latin. I would be surprised if he hadn't read De Magnete, which would beg the question, why, when he was describing gravity, did he not immediately latch on to a magnetic cosmology?
I know. Didn't he ever witness?
He would have saved us all a lot of trouble. He would have fixed that. Einstein would have never fallen prey, and his general relativity would have been within the purview where it should be, which is, general relativity should be coming out of the other equations, because special relativity was, transformations of Maxwell's equations. So general relativity naturally should have been flowing out of electromagnetism, but instead he went this gravity direction, and he had to create this cosmic constant, and it's a mess. It's a real mess, and some of it is where there are some good hard sciences that came about before we even had the atomic model. When you look at the history, we had spectroscopy long before we had the atomic model. So they had already decided what the sun was. It's a gaseous ball that's burning, and yet it just violates the thermodynamics. So I don't know how it has continued on to now, except for tradition. It sort of reminds me of the Kung Fu world. You get one guy, he's kind of popular. I'm not going to name any names, but you get a guy, and he's really popular, and he has this idea, and then he propagates that Kung Fu idea, and then eventually you get a video of a guy who's running full speed into a woman who's just breathing, and he has convinced her that she will be invincible, and I mean, he plows into her like a football player. It's sad to see, because of course she's going to be injured. That's where we are. That's the modern cause. That's standard model. It's the guy plowing into the woman who's just breathing. And when you get that distracted, then of course there has to be a changeover, and plasma cosmology is going to be the mixed martial arts of the whole situation.
What do you think about Magna Hydra?
I think exactly what Alvin thought, which is that it was incomplete, and that it did not describe plasmas completely, particularly double layers. People need to watch Gareth's See the Pattern, his 3-part video series on double layers, and take a look at the papers and look at the electric circuits. Alvin was a genius. He's part of the giants that we stand upon. But naturally, in a astrophysical, what the problem with the astrophysics community is that there's so many of them that want to be celebrities. They all want to be on Neil deGrasse Tyson. And
there's so many of them. There's so many of them want a What's the name prize? What is it?
The
I
Nobel.
should remember it. The one on, yeah, Nobel Prize. That's what they're all hunting for a Nobel Prize.
Yes, and they're willing to cheat to get it, which is the scarier thing. It's a science. They're willing to completely lie. Uh, but be that as it may, because they're on the hunt for celebrity status, they're going to attach themselves to rock stars. And Alphen was a rock star, and magnetohydrodynamics is useful for a lot of things. And it's convenient for modeling. And now that we have uh, supercomputers that can do pretty good fluid dynamical models, it's convenient, but it gives people the wrong idea about magnets, which brings me back to the magnetic reconnection. So in the Hawkins electric field guides from 1917, which I just bought a set of 6 off of eBay. There was another set. People should go look. The Hawkins electric guides are excellent. There's a very simple experiment. So it really helps if you have a magnet ball, but you could use any magnetic field as long as, of course, it's going to curve. And what you do is you take like a piece of metal. I used the handle end of an acupuncture needle. I just cut off the needle and then just had the handle. A person could use a nail and take off the head of the nail. And you magnetize it by running it across a bar magnet. You scraping it across, and then you tie a string to the center of the center of balance for the nail or the piece of metal. It should be cylindrical, and then you just simply dangle this over it. Now, if magnetic fields were really lines, the piece of metal would jump between what would appear to be like valences. It doesn't do that. It has places where it prefers to move to, but it will move in a smooth fashion, and it will follow. So what you become aware of when you do this experiment, if you're paying attention, of course, is that the magnetic field is everywhere around it's not existing in lines. It is a continuous field with gradients of concentration in the magnetic flux. And technically, it's not really flux, but that's a different story. So there's nothing to disconnect or reconnect. This idea is a real problem. It is convenient in the same way that light as a particle is a convenient model. Light is not a particle, but is a convenient model. But when you start seeing otherwise incredibly intelligent people, I mean, I was watching Action Lab, and he did a video on the photoelectric effect, and he kept talking about the photons knocking electrons out, as if these are billiard balls running into each other. This is how we know that the idea is wrong. I saw another really funny one. This is a professor, and he did a video for the Royal Society, and he was educating young people about the space-time and general relativity, and he put a bowling ball on this big sheet of fabric, blue sheet of fabric, and of course it weighs it down. And then he would spin the balls, and they would all. Now, here's the problem. Number one, he's defeating his own theory, because we know that, say, the moon, for example, is slowly escaping Earth's gravity. So it's not spiraling in towards the center at all. And number two, he's relying on Newtonian gravity to prove general relativity as a model for the students. And then the number three thing, of course, is the arbitrariness of up and down. There is no up and down in space, but there is definitely an up and down when you use a bowling ball on a piece of fabric.
Mm-hmm.
But because the visual demonstration is so powerful, people they swallow it and they take it on and they move on for the rest of their life. They'll think that they understand space-time, but it's completely arbitrary. Because if it worked that way, because the fabric of space-time could be then could be put on a vertical, if we could put it upside down in the picture, right? Why doesn't anybody just flip the picture upside down, the bitmap, just flip it upside down, and then ask, well, why isn't this Earth falling from the the sky? Why is it rolling in this framework? And the mathematicians will say, well, it's just a mathematical fabric. It's not a real fabric. Well, then it has no place in science.
They use Earth on gravity, right? Gravity on Earth, I mean, to
right. They use Newtonian gravity to describe why this thing should be rolling around a fabric of space-time gravity.
Mhm.
That is, well, it's felonious, really. That's not science.
No doubt.
So we have a real problem with visual demonstrations like that constantly are going around. I'll give you another one with the light particle thing.
Mhm.
There is a video of the slowing down of light. So okay, we've captured the light in slow motion, and they go on TED and they show this video. The light is moving through the bottle, and you can see it going through the bottle. It's absolutely beautiful. Here's the problem with that. If you could see the pulse of light of photons moving through, then in every reference frame, you should see the photons then also moving at that same velocity, correct? I mean, that's how slow motion works. If you watch a slow motion football play, the football and the player are both moving at the same slow rate. One is not suddenly going full speed and the other one is moving in slow motion. But when you watch, the light is reflecting off of the desk, and there is no pulse moving between the two and bouncing around. And as it goes through the bottle, it bends and reflects, and it's immediately on the table. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if you're watching the balls of photons moving slowly through the water bottle or Coke bottle, I think it was, then how is it getting to the table without moving that same slow speed? Why is it instantly on the table reflecting?
Mhm.
For that matter, why is it also, getting to the camera without? So there's and they gloss over it because it's such an amazing thing to see light move that slow, that you don't even stop to go, well, wait a second, this is actually showing that light is not a series of particles, which we should already know anyways, based on how it slows down instantly as it goes through different media. We have this problem. It's all throughout the sciences, and I don't know who to blame. It's easy to. Ken Wheeler loves to blame Einstein, but I think Einstein even had a problem with. I don't think he liked being a rock star celebrity. I don't think ultimately I think it gave him grief.
Yes.
But that's just my thought.
From the
About
letters
the
between
state of him.
Velikovsky and Einstein, Velikovsky had said that he was very forlorn in his older years.
Velikovsky said that?
Yes, because of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he got treated like a rock star everywhere he went, and he didn't
Yeah.
feel he deserved it.
Well, he got to the point where he was narrowed in on that where he got to, and if he went further and then what he'd previously done proved not to be total as everyone wanted it to be, well then they'd call him a fraud and everything. So that's what happens when you become a rock star. You can't.
Go ahead, finish, Grumps.
Yeah, you can't be open anymore. Yeah, you can't be open anymore because if you start going, well, I got to there and then I went to there and now this is what I've got, then they say, oh, you're frauding us or whatever. So that's really, they pigeonholed him.
Yeah, I think that it wasn't Einstein's fault that he had a lot of celebrity status, and I also don't think that it was his students' fault that they admired their teacher. I think it was the students who became the zealots. And then by the time you get to the era of the heyday of Stephen Hawking, it really was out of control.
Did you know that? I'm sorry. I thought you were. I was going to say, did you know that Stephen Hawking said there are no such thing as black holes before he died? Black holes do not exist.
I had heard that. I hadn't really looked into it. I'm not as interested in Stephen Hawking's work, mostly on account of when I listened to what he had to say. I wasn't as impressed. And I'm not saying that he wasn't a remarkable individual, but I think it's another example of somebody, they spend all their time in a certain track, and they end up being kind of stuck in that
One
rut,
trick
and
pony.
they're not able to jump track.
Yeah, he had a famous feud with another physicist. I can't remember his name, but they had a feud over black holes, and before he died, he claimed that they don't exist.
Yeah,
So,
well, I mean, now we know they don't, but they have more existence to them than dark matter and dark energy. That's for sure. And those have more existence to them than the plethora of nonsense that's now coming out. I mean, we have opened the portal of absolute horseshit when it comes to pseudoscience getting grants. These people are coming up with anything in order to try and get the big money. So
yeah,
they can talk about dark, fluffy darkinos and axions and
wimps,
dark photons and
machos.
charged machos and charged dark matter. I mean, the one thing that has turned out to be real is the Bose-Einstein condensate. But I really think that it's going to be some form of ultra cold plasma ultimately. The various forms of plasma that are out there. Imagine you get into the field of plasma research, and actually there's an entire array of types of plasma for you to study from, and there's just not enough people doing this kind of research. We don't have enough manpower to do all the research on superconductivity. The superconductivity field is really exploding. We are now at the point where they are coming up with superconductors at room temperature.
Oh
That
wow!
is absolutely amazing. And that's interesting because it's also happening concurrent with some interesting things in chemistry, such as the ability to melt gold at room temperature. Um, so when we look at this, um, an engineer friend of mine and also entrepreneur, we want to work on the puttification of stone, because I think it's very obvious that the stones, at the Inca stones, for example, um, were not polymers, but were somehow electrified, and that the crystal lattice lost the structure without getting too hot either. And you can see these where they must have attached, two electrodes to each of these stones, creating what appear to be handles. But we can tell that they're not handles because there's several of the stones where they're not, level to each other, and there's no way to really use them as rope handles. They don't stick out far enough. So why is it so common? And also, it would very succinctly explain how you get these stones to sit on top of each other and to be so tight with one
Yes.
another. You turn them into putty first, and that's why there are these places where there are stone looks like it's been cut out of the rock as if you were cutting putty or cheese, and that's probably because they were able to electrify it. Which brings up the other question: where was the energy supply? How did that work? Um, Neil Thompson is the only person I've seen come out with a convincing argument for that. Trying to get him to release that presentation again, that slideshow presentation again. So hopefully he does. Certainly, I would like to personally step through. My partner thinks it's some form of microwave,
Is that Neil
because it can't,
from Electric View?
from the electric view. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm
Uh,
about to talk to him. He wants to do an interview. I
yeah.
hope.
Well, bring up
Yeah.
bring up the he can explain the theory behind it. I don't know that anybody's ever done it yet. Electrogeology and lab and people's garage still seems to be about arc discharge. Everybody's really, they like burning things, which is fun, but that would not be how the ancients, what they were trying to do. They would have been trying to change the crystal lattice, but it had to be low temperature too, because we have the vitrified stone where someone put their hand into it. Of course, the ancients believed that he attained this electrical, uh, mystical power, and then melted the rock. But either way, however it happened, it had to have been low enough temperature. It couldn't have been red hot. So if we were to put high arc uh, electricity into that, thousands of volts, it would of course heat up quite a bit, and you wouldn't be able to put your hand into it. So, and then how could you build a wall? So I'm interested in that. I'm interested in.
So Ramon, you've got
Go
to
ahead.
get the volts about the amperage. You've got to get the volts
Yes,
about amperage, basically.
that's right. And
Would that
the
be a
question
simple
is,
person's way of putting it?
I'm sorry.
That would be a simple, not simple as in simple. That would be a lay person's way of putting it. I need the voltage, but I don't want the amperage that goes with it.
Right. And but that brings up the question: who in the BC era was creating? I mean, were these super Baghdad batteries? Who is creating DC current at that level? And the other thing is, how are you getting the puttification of the crystals to happen all through the stone and not only between the two electrodes? This is another interesting engineering problem. But obviously, the ancients solved this issue, and I think it's a pretty good proof. Whoever built the Egyptian temple, the Egyptian pyramids, was able to get around the world quite a bit, including down there to Australia. And they were bringing this knowledge with them. There is stories of Viracochans with, these power sources that they carried around with them. And if that's possible, did they maybe actually destroy their own Atlantis? Who knows? I mean, there's a lot of things that come up, and it's potential big money. I don't see how Sapphire could not become massively invested in. It really should be.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on
Yeah, I
magnetars?
agree.
What are my thoughts on what?
Magnetars.
Well, I think that they're probably a form of pinching with extreme magnetism. I think it's probably as quote simple as that. I do not believe in neutron stars, let alone ones that can spin. I had somebody write me in my academia, and everything was neutrons, and you needed nothing else. And I thought, well, that doesn't work because there are so many things that are charged. Um,
Right.
how would you get these things to want to compress? They don't even want to be around each other in the first place. So you need protons in between neutrons. So now, how are you going to get them to compress down? And then you have them spinning. We know, there is a limit when you spin an object. That at some point, it basically tears itself apart. So I don't believe in neutron stars. I think that was always someone's best guess.
Mm-hmm.
But that a magnetar is a magnetic pinch. It's a very strong pinch.
Yes.
Probably as simple
Yes.
as that. It's quote
Because
simple.
they're calling pulsars now.
Well, the pulsars are the magnetars. Their primary feature is the magnetic fields, and the pulsars are radiating, X-rays and gamma rays at a high rate. But they're both, described as a form of neutron star. If there's an astrophysicist out there, don't kill me over that. This is not an area that I study very
Well,
often.
Don Scott calls them relaxation oscillators, like a
Um,
strobe light.
Yeah, I think that a lot of these kinds of pinches are going to come down to various forms of circuit behaviors, and it may be variations of how the material is working, but it's going to be some kind of lattice, uh, and that lattice is going to behave like a condensed matter plasma. I couldn't say it'll be a crystal plasma. Robitaille has one condensed matter plasma paper, and I would love it if his channel on Sky Scholar, if he would bring that back up. Um, so people should go and read his condensed matter plasma paper. It's one of his older papers. But
Who's that now?
Robitaille, Pierre Robitaille.
Okay.
So on
Oh,
on his I forget the name of the PTEP Online, I think, is the host site. All of his papers, and if you scroll down to, the third or fourth from the bottom, he has a condensed matter plasma paper. The world of the liquid metallic hydrogen is going to get combined because charge is everywhere. It's the ubiquitous thing. Neutrons even can be divided up into two different forms of charge, so that are existing in a very tight relationship. Again, the concept of scale, the plasma electromagnetic force changes its behavior depending on the scale. And so this is going to account for the difference in power or force level between the strong, the weak, and the electromagnetic force. It's really all one force. Hello? Okay, just making sure I'm still there. I had a call drop the other day when we were when I was on Rex's show.
Yeah.
So at any rate, I hope I answered that.
Yeah, no, that was good. Yeah.
No.
Go ahead, Grouse.
No, I was just interested because I listened to your discussion on Rex's show, and it was sort of billed as clash of you and Lou were meant to be at opposite scales, but my view is, you ended up agreeing on a lot more than you disagreed on. Would that be fair to say, Ramon?
Oh, well, absolutely. I don't have any. I didn't know Lee before that call.
No.
I think he has
No.
he has his disagreement with the mainstream astrophysicists about but it turns out we both already agree about that stars are electric and all this thing. So, it was just the star thing that's up there. But for the most part, I didn't find any disagreement with him. I don't think he's completely aware of my research on Shamash, and I don't blame. That's no one's fault. We're talking about stuff so cutting edge. I mean, I need to finish editing that paper. I will admit I've set it to the side to write these other papers. Part of that is that my scans are kind of missing in the clinic. the data tables are done, but the scans are around. The paper is kind of ready for edit, and it has the animated GIF files, so where you can see the three-body problem of the star pulling apart and all this kind of stuff, as best as I can do, considering I am not an animator and I don't do this. So I had to find examples to show the visualization of what I'm talking about. And since I've been writing that, it just more evidence keeps coming up. I was just watching the Diehold guy, Vogt, I think is how you say his last name.
Yeah.
And
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
He's giving quote after quote, and he's interpreting them by micronova, but I'm reading them. I'm going, well, this goes exactly to what I'm talking about, the death of the previous star, and I love it. There's so much evidence now pouring out that is in support of the breakdown of Shamash that I'm actually.
Hello?
Yeah. I listened to most of John Boat's a lot of his presentation, and you just got to sort out, because at the moment he talks big about we've got to prepare for a catalyst in 2043. Is it Ramon? I don't know if you've come across them or not.
Well, let me tell you.
You there?
I'm sorry. Finish. Go ahead and answer. I got a thought that I don't want to forget. Go ahead.
No, I just think it's funny because, number one, these guys, whether it's Ben or Vogt, they don't know that the planet turned over less than 7,000 years ago. So even if it was a 12,000-year cycle for 7,000.
But in one of these, he does talk something along that line, but he talks about the Earth stops and changes rotation.
Yeah, well, it doesn't really change rotation. It's just sort of the angular momentum keeps it going in the same direction, but it's turned over.
Yeah.
And that happened before. It did happen, but their mechanism is not proven. What we do know is that we were in Jupiter's magnetosphere, and then we moved to Sol's magnetosphere, and that's probably accounting for the flip. There could be, though, this mechanism of the asymmetry in space probably has a portion to play as well. And I give more credence to that and looking at the wobble that we're having now. But there's no call to say that we can say that in the next 10 to 20 years it's going to absolutely happen. That doesn't mean I don't have my plan in place in case it does. You know, you think of when you read Revelations, I will come like a thief in the night. And it's like, well, I certainly, because if the sun's down, you're not going to notice that it's not up. You know what I mean? You're not going to notice that it's not acting funny. So I think about those kinds of things. But as far as a scientist would speak, you cannot know the future. You can make hypotheses about the future.
I'm going to tell you something. Speaking of that, this is right in line with the question I wanted to remember. Now, for the last couple of days, during the last hour or two of the sun being up, the atmosphere was configured in such a way that you could stare right at the sun and it didn't hurt your eyes, and you saw it just like a big orange rubber ball. And at night, for the last 2 nights, we've had a blood moon here in Michigan. Do you make anything of that? Is that some kind of telling sign of anything to come?
I do make something of the fact that it's been difficult for cellular networks to work, and for people, and that a lot of my patients. So I don't know if you're familiar that much with my medical research that I've done in clinic.
No.
But there is a strong correlation between protons or various forms of heavy material in the solar wind and an increased response to the acupuncture. So people have a greater change in their electric field. When I measured their electric field and divided that by their change in pain, the ratio was a stronger change in electric field to change in pain ratio when there was a greater electrical environment. So either cold wintry day or bright sunny day or a new moon or a full moon. Mm-hmm. And all these are conditions when you have an excess of proton activity. Protons are yin by nature, right? They're supposed to be the ones that are negative charged, but that's another story, right? That's Ben Franklin, electrical engineering history. But protons are yin by nature. It's very difficult for the body to deal with these extra charges. Basically, the charges become lodged in the nerves and channels, and they interfere with the circuit. So I came up with a model called charge distributive networks, and it is an electric circuit model. It's actually kind of a fractal model based on the work of another EE acupuncturist out of Taiwan. His model was a block wire diagram with it was a Y diagram, sort of like a 3-phase diagram, but his main concept is the fractal wave function of these channels. So I needed the entire channel, and I needed the acupuncture points themselves to behave as transformers primarily. But then you need a source on one side, and you got inductance, you got resistance, you got capacitance, you got these various measures of the body. And the model I came up with, encourages propagation down the channel, but it doesn't have to propagate. It could theoretically go in reverse against the Zener diode. And why do you want that? Because we know that there are things that counter flow. For example, gangrene. If you get, I have a gruesome story for you. I have a patient who lost both of his legs, not because of me. He went to another acupuncturist who shall remain unnamed. And this person thought that they were a genius of ancient classic knowledge, and they needled him above Tai Chong, and they angled it up. They did strong stimulation, peck and thrust. He went into a spasm and they left him on the table for an hour uncovered, shivering. So his chi totally reversed. and he developed wounds as if he was a diabetic on both of his, well, above liver 3, really. Uh, and they rotted. I tried to get it to go back, but as soon as you start getting the signal going back in the right direction, he has to go off and work in construction, and so he's wearing these boots. He's getting infected, winds up losing both of those limbs. To this day, he still gets rocked in his trigeminal nerve with these vibrational attacks that give him like a seizing pain in his face as the counterflow signal tries to essentially hack into his brain. This is very ancient medicine. There's nothing new about that. But the main point is that you have to account for a backwards mechanism, whether it's gangrene or something as innocuous as shaken hand syndrome, which usually comes from people running jackhammers or something. But there was one kid who got it from playing PS2 too much and had the vibration controllers. He was like Japanese and played it like 20 hours a day or something.
Damn.
And so, you have to have some mechanism for these signals to flow backwards, whether they're fluid signals or ion signals. There has to be a mechanism. So the Zener diode prevents most of the signal from returning across the transformer, but it enables it. It's possible if you have too much voltage on the right side of the transformer will transform backwards, and that's what disease really ends up being. So
what you're saying is like, I don't know much about acupuncture, but it's basically like you turn the body into a generator and start taking energy out of the body is what happens. Would that be a fair?
Yeah. So what the needles
the
are
idea
able
of
to do,
acupuncture, as I understand it, is you're putting energy in through the needles that puts energy back in, which is the electric
not
field.
so much puts them
into
in,
your
but
body. Is that right?
you end up freeing by pumping out some of these protons and other charges. When you clear the channel, the transformer works more correctly, and then you have a stronger signal in the positive direction, so-called positive direction, right, left to right in the diagram. And when the body gets full of these protons, when it gets too yin in nature, it doesn't function well, and the consciousness doesn't function well. And this stuff is so predictable. I have an interesting story here. So I did a show on Catherine Kaufman's channel. I did an Electric Universe show on a Monday night. That night, a strange storm moved in. The next morning, there was a large amount of what's called the killing chi. And I was driving down the highway to go to my clinic, which was wasn't another city. We've closed that clinic because of the COVID and everything. And there was a bolt of lightning came straight down, and it was a long enough stroke. I watched it actually dissipate and form the little balls of plasma as it dissipated. So I was like, "Oh, there is a lot of killing chi today." And then I started noticing it was trucks, and so all these different trucks were it felt like I was trying to be killed here. So I pulled off at the gas station and I just let all that energy go by. And then I went to work and everything was fine. I heard then later on in the week that my former master's wife that morning was hit by a cement truck. She didn't die that day, but she did die eventually from infection in the hospital, or I think maybe a clot was thrown or something like that. But she was hit by a cement truck that same day. So how did that happen? We would go back to the plasma cosmology. There was too much of this yin type of energy in the air. The cement truck driver was affected. Maybe she was affected. There's some kind of distraction. Either way, their charge distributive networks were not functioning correctly, and it was a dangerous day. It was an absolutely dangerous day, and it wasn't purely about rain or anything. But you can hear on these kinds of days, you can hear more sirens. And again, going back to the new moons, full moons, it's well known that psych wards and hospitals have an upsurge in psychiatric cases. And I would say there's probably spikes in suicide attempts, and other situations like alcohol abuse, when we have more of this yin. So as the magnetosphere drops, people are getting more exposed. They're feeling more yin, and in this case, it doesn't mean female. It means consumed. It means disrupted. Yin can also be a form of division. Yin is kind of an upper category, and there's lots of different things under yin. And there's true yin and there's false yin, but that's a different story.
Man, you've got so many papers here, Ramon.
Yeah. Have you seen? Did you? One of
This
my
is
favorites
interesting.
is the newer one. Of course, I did the two trip reports.
Are they
Uh,
new by top or bottom?
Top is the newest ones. Yeah.
Okay.
So going up from the simple guides for friends, family, and common folk how to get into crypto. You have the trip report to the Culvertown platform. That was cool. So we had a drone flyer come out, and his drone. He's a professional drone flyer. His drone, and the quote is in the paper. Uh, got zapped. It got electromagnetically pulsed at 400 feet above the knob. And remember, the knobs of Kentucky are electrogeology formations. We know this because you can look at the knobs near to Houstonville, Kentucky, and it's a Lichtenberg formation. They're all at about 950-foot elevation, except for two main knobs. One would be the Green River knob, which is the anode in that region, and then when you arc around, then you have the Pilot knob, um, and it's an anode. And in fact, it looks exactly like the Pilot knob in North Carolina. They're roughly the same kind of shape. I think that the one in Kentucky is 1,000 foot shorter, but that might be a continental shelf thing. So, the knobs up near the Culvertown platform, which I was there because I think it's a Saturnian egg. Um, I think it's a 9,000-year-old egg, and people, when they click the paper, it has the tour. It's a beautiful tour. Three-dimensional tour. Uh, but I think that all those knobs were sputtering arc discharges of the same event. Now, interestingly enough, if you follow the curve, so Kentucky's one big dome, like the center of Kentucky is a dome technically. It's a very large dome. If you follow the arc around the bluegrass and you follow the knobs around, you end up at a crypto explosive electric site called Hicks Dome. It's in the south of Illinois. And in fact, I'm going there this week. I'm going to go camp at Garden of the Gods because I found uh, the Garden of the Gods discussion that I've done with Rex and his friend. Oh gosh, what's that guy's name?
Not Diamond.
Diamond. Um,
Yep.
I,
But
I
Greg
did,
knows Diamond.
yeah.
Diamond Dave? Yeah.
And I talked with them about it. That's in the trip report on the Pebble Beach. So at the end of that trip report, you can see the same Garden of the Gods evidence that I provided. Well, I'm going back. The reason I'm going back is there is a platform also at the Garden of the Gods, and I want to camp there. There's an interesting energy to the whole place for sure. Well, it's Illinois, but
Oh, no. Okay.
the the Garden of the Gods in Illinois is on the edge of this crypto explosive event called Hicks Dome. And the geologists try to say, this is all in the trip report, but they try to say that it's a volcano, an ancient volcano, but they don't have a gravity anomaly. You know what they have? A magnetic anomaly. So they have this huge magnetic anomaly, and then they want to talk. Of course, they're going to blame it on the iron. The question, I'm sitting there going, okay, well, why is it there? Because you can look at it, you can see it's got a bow shock. It's only on one side, right? This is not a volcano. So now it's at the end of this arc of Lichtenberg knob formations in Kentucky that go around the dome, that is the center. Now remember, in that dome of Kentucky, in the bluegrass region, is a Palladian thunderbolt. Why was that Palladian thunderbolt from it's an octagon, 56 craters. Why was it attracted to that dome? Probably because it's always active anytime there's something going on. So we're out there measuring this Culvertown platform, and we're taking pictures, and we send them over the knobs, and it gets impulsed at 400 feet above the knob. And 400 feet is I mean, that's quite a bit of distance as far as electromagnetism is concerned. I mean, I don't know what kind of flux was coming out of this knob, but the drone barely made it back. The link to the YouTube video for the flight over is in there. You can see the moment when it gets pulsed. It is not even over top of the knob yet. It's almost over top of the knob. So that's in that triple.
Who did that video?
Go ahead.
Who did that video? Who did the video with it getting pulsed?
His name is Isaac Cooper. He is a professional.
No, what I say is, yeah, but you haven't uploaded it yet.
No, it's all uploaded. Yeah, and it's all uploaded. So when you scroll down the trip report for Culvertown, it has the virtual tour and the video tour, and then the Pebble Beach is the one that has the Garden of the Gods photos. So those are the two trip reports that I did fairly recently. They're short little papers. I think that people will enjoy. The Pebble Beach was fun. The reason why I made the Pebble Beach one wasn't to talk about the Garden of the Gods specifically. It was to talk about the fact that at Pebble Beach in the Red River Gorge, I found this stratification in Figure 1 on page 2, where you have changes in the angle of the layers of this, supposedly ancient sandstone, basically what were sandbars in the old, dinosaur days. And then it changes to an angle, then it goes back to being level, then it changes to the same angle again, then it goes back to being level. Well, I found the same thing 60 kilometers away at Dogfoot Hollow, and I've got in there the coordinates and what date they were taken and everything, and you can see that this is not making sense from a uniformitarian perspective. And by the way, the Dogfoot Hollow we were there for archaeological reasons, because we're looking at it as a potential potential stone fort because of the particular pieces that were found that are on page 4 of that trip report. That's why we were there. We weren't there for electrical universe stuff, and but it happens to be on the same ridge that there's a little gap, and then you have the Indian Fort Mountain. Of course, Indian Fort is infamous because it's a stone fort of the Fort Ancient culture, and people thought it was Vikings for a while, but it was not. It was these Welsh, the Nikotani as the character called them. And guess what's right across from this Lichtenberg called the Indian Fort is the Pilot Knob. So Pilot Knob, and then the Big Hill Ridge where Dogfoot Hollow is, and the Lichtenberg, known as, which is where the supposed vortex. You know how some people say that Sedona has a vortex? Well, Berea is known to have a vortex as well, and it's because of the Indian Fort Mountain where the Lichtenberg is on that part. It's not the best Lichtenberg in the Knobs region, but it is one of them, and right next to those is Pilot Knob. And, Pilot Knob has, again, this very interesting anode type formation. It reminds me of basically if it were enabled to continue, it would end up like Devil's Tower.
What's it called again?
Pilot Knob. So there's actually 2 Pilot Knobs in Kentucky, but the one that I'm talking about looks like the Pilot Knob in North Carolina. And so
elevation.
We're talking about 900 feet. The Pilot Knob gets up to 1,200 feet. 1,200
from ground level.
Oh no, from ground level. It's surprisingly steep hiking. But so if you were to go from the highway up to this rock where it's changing angle and then going flat again, changing angle, going flat again, you're probably talking about 250 feet of climbing. Same thing with the Pebble Beach, and obviously the Pebble Beach is the same elevation, but they're 60 kilometers from each other, and they have nothing to do with faults. There's no There's no fault that's connecting the two. It has nothing to do with upthrust at all.
You know, one thing I noticed about the Garden of the Gods is it certainly is unusual topography for the Midwest to be that rocky.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but you see it's at the edge. You see it's at the edge of that Higgs dome and that crypto explosive event. And I think that it was the bolide splitting and electrifying, but it could be a burn. You know, and the question is then now that would present a new challenge, probably not to Andy Hall, but in general probably to the electrogeology. How do you create a bow shock with this arc discharge? I'm not saying it's impossible. That's not my particular region. You know, that maybe more Billy Elverton's goal. He may have examples of bow shocks, but how do you create it to where it's an asymmetric situation where it's not happening on the other side, and then that would create some real problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious that there is a strike here. I mean, you look at Figure 7 on page 6, and you can see which direction it had come from, and where the blast occurred.
On your paper?
Yeah, in the trip report there.
Which one is it?
The Pebble Beach, the
Pebble Beach.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw it. Yes, I'll find
yeah.
it.
So on page 6, you can see the Higgs dome.
Oh, okay,
Again,
that's good. All right then.
I go into this
Just
because
click on it.
the geology.
I've that one, yep.
The geology is so similar between the Red River Gorge and the Garden of the Gods. That's why it's in here. The Lysagang or Lysagang banding is happening in both places. It's more pronounced at Garden of the Gods, but it's in the Red River Gorge as well. Well, it's in the entire Daniel Boone ley line.
That's interesting.
And again, the Higgs dome is at the edge. The Higgs dome is on the other side of the Ohio River from Kentucky, and it is there are knobs banding all the way around the dome of Kentucky. So it appears to me to be one huge event, and I don't know if it's related to Andy Hall's formation of the Southwest event, or if it's a completely different event. Greg, the picture on page 8, the figure 9, shows the polarized behavior that it defies. It completely throws the uniformitarian explanation out the door. That is not possible, because you can see the line of material going from the bottom of the picture towards the top of the picture, and the complete the change of the polarity and behavior from the right to left side of that band, and then above a certain point where suddenly the banding is ceasing, but the line is continuing.
It seems to me that this is two different substances. Like this maybe got thrown on top of this.
It didn't. But back to my point, there is a platform at the Garden of the Gods that it looks like a hexagon on one level and an octagon on the next level, and I'm thinking that it may have been shaped by the natives in order to first give witness to Saturn, and then to give witness to Jupiter. And I'm going to measure the segment lengths and take a look at the angles and see if there's any ratio congruence between them. Particularly the octagons, because of my work with the Jovian octagons and the Hopewell sites, which I'm not going to lie, I'm extremely disappointed in Graham Hancock, because he looked at this basically, and you can, when you look at the Jovian octagons, it is a lock and key mechanism. It's literally they're asymmetric in length and in angle. So you can you can find any octagons you like and try and fit them. You're not going to be able to get it to work. Well, to get them between the two, to get them between the mounds and the vortices of Jupiter's North Pole. And so it's just a little disappointing. and I thank him, for at least, he's inspired a lot of work. It's sort of like Dave Talbot and Wall Thornhill and all those guys, very inspirational. But it's a little bit frustrating that he's not willing to take, because it throws the Zamora stuff out. And I think that you and your audience know that Zamora is, taking a very narrow perspective on what happened to the megafauna. If there was a comet, it was a small part of the show. There was a lot more interesting things going on. And anyways, the excuse he gave was kind of disappointing, because look at this rock. I mean, this is fascinating stuff. Any geologist worth his salt would look at this and go, "This isn't right. We can't. This isn't explained in the typical fashion." And it's right in the entrance. If people are willing to go to the Garden of the Gods and just go on the sidewalk tour, just the normal sidewalk, I didn't have to go way off trail, and it's right there towards the entrance. So it's been sitting there waiting for somebody to discover it. And I'm starting to think that this electrogeology is even more common than we were, thinking before. Sometimes it's going to be a little difficult. On page 9, the final page of that trip report, the Pebble Beach, is again Dogfoot Hollow, and there's these salt veins, and they even look electric, and it looks burned.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's the only example that I've ever seen in the entire Daniel Boone National Forest. I'm not saying it's the only one there, but these, soda veins, where do they come from? Why are they there? I think it's an example of some form of transmutation. And
they've stayed locked up for a long time.
I'm sorry,
Ramon, and they've stayed locked up in that for a long time.
It sure has, and
So
it's about the same.
if it's
Like I say,
salt,
it's about the same level.
It's empty.
It's about the same level as those rocks that have these strange angles, and then they go back to the flat, and then they go back to the angles.
Hold on, I gotta.
Now I don't know the Garden of the Gods, the Hicks Dome elevation. I'd have to look that up. I don't know if that's at 900 feet or not of elevation. So they may not be. You can see what the geologists have to say on page 6 there. No shock indicators, a dome lacking in ring depression and razor rim, no gravity anomaly, magnetic high centered, at 6 miles northeast. I don't know. It seems like it's right in front of them, but at the same time, I realize it's very difficult for some people to make the leap. But I don't know why it's so difficult when there's so many natives around the world, and then there's so many myths in our own culture that basically say exactly what's going on.
It really does. Even just looking at it, you can tell that some kind of an event happened.
Yes.
I mean, look at the surrounding areas, how tortured it is.
Exactly. Exactly. And that is a hallmark.
Well, you'd also say that to the left of the screen, it's been a lot of water through there at one stage.
Oh, absolutely.
Electricity.
Looking at what Peg's got up now, you'd say to the left of screen, looking at that, you'd say, geez, it's been a lot of water through there working that.
Yeah, the entire area at one point, the entire area was on the equator, according to standard geology. Certainly, the Daniel Boone National Forest ley line, going from Tennessee up to Ohio, there are places you hike in it, and it really does feel like the Yucatan, or you can even feel that primal, almost dinosaur era feeling. It doesn't feel like any of the other temperate the temperate forests around.
Mm-hmm.
And there are places where it attracts increased rainfall without having an increased elevation. So you don't have suddenly an extra 1,000 foot of mountain, and yet there's more rainfall. It's one of the unique features.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Interestingly enough,
because where we live, we're in this little valley, and we're meant to get the equivalent of 16 inches more rain a year than everywhere around us.
So that would
And then
indicate
if
that.
you head towards,
Go ahead, Gareth. I'm
towards
sorry.
St Arnaud, if you head towards St Arnaud from where I am, it's a little place there, and it's probably about 30 miles from where I am, and it's the same. You get a really good wet patch in there, and it's beautiful country. And the rest of it's all that hard hole gold mining stuff, clay, and that. But anyway, keep going.
Well, that would tell me that how much rainfall an area gets would depend on the amount of charge it has, or something to
That's
that effect.
exactly what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yes.
thinking that Australia's problem for most of the continent is that it's still recovering. And this is the same thing with the Sahara. And they both have a extreme burn mark. One is an anode, you have Ayers rock, and the other one has a cathode and the Rakat structure. And I don't know if those two are the same pair of anode and cathode, but we would need to look. Now in America, I think that the cathode, at least the largest one that I've seen, was probably the Black Hills, and then the Devil's Tower was the anode at the same moment. In China, it appears that Wudong Mountain was the cathode, and I think maybe Mount Tai, or I'm trying to remember. There's an anvil-shaped mountain there. I think it may have been the anode. So these would then be from the primal era. These wouldn't be from the Clash of the Titans era. I don't know when Andy Hall's thinking that his event happened. And then the people who get into the Great Lakes being one large thunderbolt that excavated the region, the Great Lakes of North America. I don't know when, but the larger, the more primal is what I'm thinking. Because when we look at the Paradian thunderbolt that's in Kentucky, it is big, but it's only a mile wide, and it's a single pulse. And it was generated by the magnetospheres rubbing and inducing current in the plasmasphere. So this is not an arc discharge. So what was it that was arc discharging? I think it was a star. I think it was Shamash. And so we're going back to the primal beginning. It could have also been the moon, because the moon has obvious electrical excavation on the face that's facing towards the Earth. The rest of it looks like a Jovian body, but facing the Earth, there's a region revealing black dust.
I've often wondered if that ice came down through the Great Lakes and all that from Canada. What were they talking about? 2 mile high of ice melting in a very short time. I often wondered if that actually melted from underneath. So it wasn't,
maybe,
on top. It was the Earth, its electrical core either got a voltage spike or lost, and it basically melted the ice from underneath, not from the top, and then sent it all, boom, off it went on its run.
Well, it's possible.
What do they call that? 12,500 years ago event. What they call it. I've heard Randall Carlson talk about it a lot, and a few others, and it is very interesting. And I've often wondered if it actually melted from underneath through, on talking on the electrical system. The sun had changed, and that changed the voltages in Earth. And that caused that possible underneath. Yeah, go, Greg.
I just wanted to point out one thing that I noticed that's kind of uncanny. If you look at all the lakes in North America, they all lined up. It's almost like something bounced through. You know what I mean?
By
Well, it almost looks like, I don't know, like a charge or some kind of huge thing of electricity just went all the way through. I mean, why would they be in a straight line like that?
Well, I mean, that again goes back to the point. My point in the megafauna extinction paper, I make 2 points touching the things you guys said.
Mm-hmm.
The first is, and in the new addendum paper, I promise I will get it finished. It's a big big update to the megafauna extinction by thunderbolts. The first thing is that the moon is not. People have this imagination that the moon is going around this nice orbit around us. That is not how it is. If you look at a map of observations of the eclipses go in all sorts of directions. This moon is going around, and it's predictable now with computers. We can predict it, but it was so chaotic that the Chinese had a very hard time. They had very complex mathematical models trying to figure out how to predict the movement of the moon. That would be one thing. And then number two, I did the calculations on these thunderbolts. And you needed something like, don't quote me, quote my paper, don't quote me. Something like 6 to 10,000 of these Palladian thunderbolts, single pulse now, not even continuous pulse, but single pulse, to boil Antarctica. I mean, when you talk about the levels of energy. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the Hudson Bay craters, they're massive, number one. And number two, if they had to go through 2 miles of ice, these craters would not exist. And if it had enough heat to get through 2 miles of ice and still make these massive craters, the whole world's life would have ended. It wouldn't have just been some megafauna and a few animals in the Northern Pole. It would have been a problem worldwide. So Zamora and Carlson and them, the problem they have, how do you generate that kind of energy without wiping out the world? And how do you be selective? Because a comet cannot be selective. Megafauna and step potential can be selective. By the way, a patient I had today knows a person who died in step potential this last month, I think she said, or last week, something like that. He got out of his car, and there was some kind of short in his yard, his own yard, and he died from step potential at his own house. Wow. The child was injured, but lived. The wife got out, but then for some reason she didn't. Maybe she was wearing high heels or something, but she did not suffer. But he actually died from step potential. So it's not like an ancient problem or something. This is a modern, potential thing that can happen. And he never touched any power line. Right now, you take it's in my megafauna extinction paper how far these things can propagate. I'll find the page here. First of all, you'll have to scroll down. The megafauna extinction paper has been around for a little bit, so it's
not this paper, is it? No.
It is. You scroll down and let's see. It's called Plasma Petroglyphs, Earthworks, and Megafauna Extinction. It's pretty far down there.
We did a show on it.
Yeah. But I'm going to find the page number, and we're going to talk about it, because we didn't get to, when we did the show, we didn't get to talk about the propagation of the thunderbolts. I remember that now. We didn't really go into that. So if you go to, looks like page 117.
Hot. I gotta find it.
It's hot.
What the date was that you did that one? Could you remember, Ramon? Because they're all dated on the site.
Oh God, we did it. We did that show. We did that show.
How many years ago? How many years ago did you upload the paper?
Oh, the paper is from 2018, I think.
That's maybe probably when we did it.
No, it was. I think we did it in 2019. I think we did the paper.
Yeah, but that sounds about right. You got so many papers.
Yeah, I know. So page 119 is where I start the lightning physics, and this is from the work of Uman, and I'm quoting him here. So the 4 types of strikes. Well, actually, this is my summary.
I like this. I want to talk about this sometime, Ramon.
And then, you bear in mind the problem of lightning has initiated inside thunderclouds, one of the biggest unsolved problems in lightning physics, one of the biggest mysteries in atmospheric physics, etc. So this is really interesting. So you keep going down, then comes the page on page 120 is the step potential.
I'm still trying to find your paper. I'm still scrolling down.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, you can scroll down. Plasma, petroglyphs, earthworks, and the megafauna extinction. It's not the very bottom, but it's towards the bottom.
Right now, I'm at the dangers of warming and replenishing. So, dark matter, songs, the sky, the eclipse glyph. I heard that.
Oh, that's somebody else's. That sounds like somebody else's page.
Yeah, there
Oh,
are
heck,
people
how did I
places.
get on somebody else?
I don't know. I have no
Oh,
idea.
No, they're
jeez.
all put in there. Yeah.
I was on yours. Okay.
you
Anyways,
gave, you just gave somebody some good advertisement. Free advertisement.
I
No,
can
no
cut it
worries. No, I'm being funny. I'm being funny.
out. But anyways, I recently heard that s- lunar eclipses slow the rotation of the Earth.
Hmm. That's interesting. I would
Hmm.
have to look at. I haven't seen that, but in some degree, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It was in a crop circle, believe it or not, and they deciphered it. And it said that's what it said.
Huh.
Okay. All right. Where it's called plasma.
Plasma, petroglyphs, earthworks, and megafauna extinction.
Can I just type that in?
Yeah, you just can. Well, you got to scroll
Because I'm
enough to
not
where
finding it.
they hide.
Plasma.
They hide like older. They hide the older papers. So.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
but
Well, I'm looking
if you
plasma.
control if no control F, just find
Found it.
megafauna.
Found it.
There you go, and then go
Okay.
down to page 117 there.
Okay.
117. Well, really 119.
Ooh. Okay. I'm almost
I'm
there.
57, Greg.
I went a little too far. Okay. 113, 114, 15, right about. Ooh, that's cool. I like that. 117. Right. Okay. I'm on 117.
Right. So
Solar,
what I'm
wind,
doing
electric.
is I'm combining the works of several people here. We've got Donald Scott, we've got Jurgens, and we've got Iman. And then we finally get to, on page 120, we get to the step potential, and it starts talking about the step potential. And this is important. The higher the soil resistivity and the current, the higher the step voltage between A and B. The larger the distance between A and B, the larger the voltage between A and B. This is important. If you're a megafauna, you have feet wider apart than other animals. This is absolutely key evidence. So in the model, if you look on page 121, this is his stuff from page 90 of his structured protection grounding text.
Hmm.
It talks about a model, a spherical model. I maintain that people. Oh, this is actually from Don Garnett's work. If people want to take a look at a better model, maybe someone could do the work on a cylindrical mathematical model. I'm no longer I'm not a big fan of doing calculus anymore. So if somebody really intelligent out there wants to do cylindrical, because obviously, you know, the geology of regions like the Midwest is that you have large sections of bedrock that are running in basically big parallel sheets. So this, the lightning model with it going in a sphere is fine, but I'm almost certain that the cylindrical calculations would actually propagate the step potential further from the strike than the spherical model. But that is something I haven't had time to go back and verify myself. So on page 122, it explains how you measure the step potential, and why it's really important. The wider the person's feet are, the more likely for them. And the way it works is this: your body has the same basic resistance. We'll call it an average impedance. Okay, so then you have V equals IR. If you have the same R, then when V goes up, you're also going to change the current at the same time. Does that make sense? Because R is constant, V goes up, I must go up. If I goes up, then you have a problem for large animals. Well, for anything really, because it only takes 30 milliamps to stop a heart. But for the larger animals, they're going to have an increased amount of current going through them. And as you know, elephants or mammoths, mastodons, etc., would have had very sensitive feet. This is a known thing about elephants, that they have extremely sensitive feet. That's probably an electrical property. So you have all these animals that are very large, that are not in caves or not in trees. Grizzly cubs can climb trees, and black bears are in trees all the time. But short-faced bear probably could not climb trees. And giant ground sloth, I mean, it's going to be a problem. The camels, the North American camel, the dire wolf, the American lion.